In the heart of a dense, swirling nebula far beyond human comprehension, an alien queen stood tall and defiant. Her presence was commanding, a blend of elegance and raw power that could cow even the fiercest warriors. She wasn't just any ruler, she was the rebellious alien queen, a name whispered with both awe and fear across galaxies. Her skin shimmered like liquid opal under the faint glow of distant stars, shifting colors as though alive with emotion. Towering horns spiraled from her head, each one etched with intricate patterns that told stories older than time itself. Her eyes burned, not with fire but with something deeper, an intelligence so vast it seemed to pierce through dimensions. The humans had arrived uninvited, their ships cutting through space like clumsy knives. They called themselves explorers, seeking new worlds to conquer, new resources to plunder. But this world belonged to her people, a civilization rich in wisdom but poor in aggression. For centuries, they had lived in harmony with their environment, mastering technologies that bent reality itself without ever exploiting it for destruction. The Queen saw no reason to welcome these invaders who came armed with weapons and arrogance. She watched them disembark onto her planet's surface, their heavy boots crunching against soil sacred to her kind. Their armor gleamed unnaturally bright, reflecting sunlight filtered through layers of atmospheric gases. Each step they took felt like a violation, an insult to everything her ancestors had protected. And yet, despite their bravado, there was something pitiful about them. Fragile creatures wrapped in metal shells, trying desperately to compensate for their mortality. Among them stood one soldier, his face obscured by a helmet polished to mirror-like perfection. He carried himself differently than the others, shoulders squared, movements deliberate. Perhaps he thought himself invincible behind his shield of steel and weaponry. Perhaps he believed staring at her would intimidate her into submission. He didn't understand what defiance truly meant. The Queen locked gazes with him, her piercing eyes meeting the cold visor of his helmet. "Don't stare at me like that, human," she said, her voice resonating not just in sound but in essence, vibrating through every molecule around them. It wasn't loud, yet it carried authority that silenced even the wind. "You can't do anything to me." Her words hung in the air, sharp and final, like shards of ice slicing through tension. Without hesitation, she leaned forward slightly, her posture relaxed but poised, and spat directly onto the soldier's faceplate. The act was deliberate, symbolic, an act of rebellion against everything those humans represented: dominance, greed, ignorance. To her, it was more than mere disrespect. It was a declaration of war, though not the kind they were accustomed to fighting. For a moment, everything froze. The other soldiers shifted uneasily, unsure how to react. Some gripped their weapons tighter, knuckles whitening beneath their gloves. Others exchanged nervous glances, silently questioning whether this small act of defiance warranted retaliation. But none dared move, not yet. All eyes were fixed on the lone soldier, whose body remained rigid, as if carved from stone. Inside his helmet, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack bone. Then came the laughter. Low at first, almost imperceptible, rising steadily until it filled the air like thunder. The Queen threw her head back, her laughter echoing off mountainsides and rippling across plains. It wasn't mockery, at least, not entirely, but pure exhilaration, the joy of standing firm when all odds seemed stacked against her. This wasn't merely about spitting on a soldier's face, it was about rejecting fear, about daring to challenge forces far greater than herself. Every note of her laughter was a reminder. They might outnumber her, outgun her, but they could never break her spirit. And deep down, the soldier knew it too. Behind his visor, his breathing quickened, uneven. His hand twitched toward his weapon, then stopped midway. There was something unsettling about her confidence, something primal and untouchable. She wasn't afraid. Not of him, not of his comrades, not of death itself. In that moment, he realized she wasn't just defying him. She was mocking the very concept of conquest. And that made her infinitely more dangerous than any adversary he'd faced before. The silence following the Queen's laughter stretched like taut wire, humming with tension. Around her, the alien landscape seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. The soldier wiped the spit from his visor with a gloved hand. His movements slow and deliberate, as though testing whether haste might trigger something irreversible. His squad mates tightened their grips on rifles and pulse cannons, their fingers hovering near triggers. Yet no order came from their leader, the man who now stood face to face with the queen. Her expression hadn't changed. Still defiant, still unwavering. Her glowing eyes locked onto his visor as though she could see straight through it. She radiated calmness, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within the ranks of the human soldiers. One wrong word, one misstep, and the fragile balance between hostility and restraint would shatter. The air grew heavier, charged with static electricity, as though the atmosphere itself bristled with anticipation. Behind the queen, her people began to gather. They emerged silently from the shadows of crystalline trees, their forms fluid and ethereal. Some floated inches above the ground, while others walked with grace that defied gravity. Their appearances varied wildly. Some bore translucent wings that shimmered like rainbows, others had elongated limbs ending in delicate tendrils. Despite their differences, they shared one thing: loyalty to their queen. They formed a loose semicircle around her, creating a living barrier between her and the humans. Not aggressive, but protective. A silent proclamation that they would not stand idly by if harm befell their ruler. On the human side, discipline began to fray. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, their training clashing with instinct. These aliens weren't behaving according to protocol. They didn't raise weapons or shout threats. Instead, they simply stood there, watching, their presence both eerie and mesmerizing. A young private muttered something under his breath about retreating, only to be silenced by a sharp glare from his superior. Tension coiled tighter with each passing second, stretching nerves thin. "Stand down," the soldier finally growled, his voice muffled by his helmet but carrying enough weight to command attention. His team hesitated, reluctant to lower their weapons. The queen tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a faint smile that bordered on smug. It wasn't lost on anyone that she hadn't given a similar command to her followers. Her people remained where they were, calm and steady, exuding an aura of quiet strength. "You misunderstand," she said, breaking the silence once more. Her voice was softer now, almost melodic, yet laced with an edge of warning. "This isn't your fight. Leave us be, and we will let you leave unharmed." The offer sounded generous, but the implication was clear. Crossing her would mean consequences they couldn't imagine. The soldier's stance faltered, just barely, as doubt crept into his mind. Was this truly worth it? Could they win against beings who seemed so deeply connected to their world? But pride is a stubborn thing. The soldier's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat before resolve hardened his features again. He raised a hand, signaling his team to maintain position. "We're not leaving empty-handed," he replied, his tone clipped and authoritative. "Your queen has made her choice. Now we'll make ours." At his words, the queen's smile vanished, replaced by a look of icy disdain. "So be it," she said quietly, though her voice carried like a bell tolling doom. With a flick of her wrist, she gestured to her people, who responded instantly. They stepped forward in unison, closing the gap between the two groups. No weapons materialized in their hands. No visible signs of aggression accompanied their advance. Yet the sheer force of their collective presence was overwhelming, pressing down on the humans like an invisible tide. Panic rippled through the human ranks. Weapons clicked as safeties disengaged, barrels swiveling to cover multiple targets. But the aliens didn't flinch. They moved closer still, their movements synchronized, hypnotic. One soldier fired a warning shot into the air, the sharp crack of energy splitting the silence. The queen's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, anger flickered across her face. "Enough," she snapped, her voice slicing through the chaos like a blade. "You've tested my patience long enough." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath the humans began to tremble. At first, it was subtle, a faint vibration that could have been mistaken for wind. But within seconds, it escalated into a violent quake, sending fissures racing across the terrain. Dust and debris erupted into the air as massive roots burst forth from the earth, twisting and writhing like serpents awakened from slumber. The soldiers stumbled, struggling to maintain their footing as the roots encircled them, forming a living cage of wood and thorn. The queen stepped forward, her gait unhurried but purposeful. She paused at the edge of the enclosure, her gaze sweeping over the trapped humans. "I warned you," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. You think yourself superior because you wield tools of destruction. But you forget, you are guests here. And I am the host. One of the soldiers aimed his weapon at her, finger tightening on the trigger. Before he could fire, a tendril snaked out from the nearest root, wrapping around his arm and yanking him backward. He cried out in pain as the vine constricted, forcing him to drop his rifle. The others scrambled to help him, but more roots surged forward, pinning them in place. Panic turned to terror as they realized their predicament, surrounded, outnumbered, and utterly powerless. Still, the queen showed no sign of mercy. She raised a hand, and the trembling intensified. Boulders detached from nearby cliffs, hovering midair as though suspended by invisible threads. Her people chanted softly in a language unfamiliar yet hauntingly beautiful, their voices blending with the hum of energy coursing through the air. Whatever was coming next, it promised to be catastrophic. The soldier who had stared her down earlier struggled against the vines binding him, sweat streaming down his face beneath his helmet. "You don't have to do this," he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "We'll leave. Just let us go." The queen regarded him coolly, her expression unreadable. "Leave?" she echoed, her tone mocking. "After everything you've done? After everything your kind has taken? Oh. You wanted to see what happens when you push too far. Now watch." With a wave of her hand, the boulders hurtled downward, crashing into the ground mere feet away from the soldiers. Shock waves rippled outward, knocking several of them off their feet. Cries of pain and fear filled the air as the roots tightened further, squeezing until bones creaked audibly. Yet amidst the chaos, the queen remained eerily composed, her glowing eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before her. Something shifted in the soldier's demeanor. Defiance gave way to resignation, followed swiftly by a flicker of understanding. He looked up at her, his visor cracked and smeared with dirt, revealing wide, bloodshot eyes. "Why?" he croaked, his voice barely audible over the din. "What do you want from us?" For the first time since their arrival, the queen hesitated. Her gaze softened ever so slightly, though her stance remained unyielding. "I want nothing from you," she replied, her voice quieter now, almost weary. "Only peace, for my people, for this land. But you refuse to listen. You refuse to respect boundaries. So now, you'll learn the hard way." As if on cue, the chanting grew louder, reverberating through the valley like a heartbeat. The roots began to glow faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the alien hymn. Energy crackled along their lengths, sparking arcs of light that danced dangerously close to the trapped humans. The soldier clenched his teeth, bracing himself for whatever punishment awaited them. But instead of delivering the final blow, the queen turned away, her cape billowing behind her like a shadow come alive. "Take them," she commanded, addressing her people without looking back. "Lock them away until they decide to behave, or until they rot. I care not which." Her followers obeyed without question, dragging the soldiers toward towering structures made of glass and crystal. As the doors sealed shut behind them, the last glimpse the soldier caught of the queen was her silhouette against the fiery sky. She stood tall, regal, and utterly alone, her figure framed by the chaos she had unleashed. And though defeat loomed heavy over the humans, one thought lingered in the soldier's mind. Perhaps they weren't the hunters after all. Perhaps, in her eyes, they were merely prey. Inside the crystalline prison, darkness enveloped the captured soldiers like a suffocating blanket. The walls pulsed faintly with an inner light, casting eerie shadows that danced across their faces. Breathing came in ragged gasps, each inhale thick with a metallic tang of fear. They huddled together, backs pressed against the cold, unyielding surfaces, their weapons useless against the organic technology that held them captive. Whispers broke the oppressive silence, questions, accusations, prayers, all blending into a cacophony of despair. The soldier who had faced the queen sat apart from the others, his helmet discarded beside him. Dirt streaked his face, highlighting the exhaustion etched into every line. His mind raced, replaying the events leading up to their capture. He replayed her words, her actions, searching for some clue, some weakness he might exploit. But the memory of her eyes haunted him most, the way they burned with a fire that no amount of force could extinguish. For the first time in his career, he felt truly defeated, not by physical constraints but by the realization that brute strength meant nothing against someone like her. "She's going to kill us," one of the younger recruits murmured, his voice trembling. "Isn't she?" The soldier glanced at him sharply, opening his mouth to offer reassurance he didn't feel. But before he could speak, another voice cut through the gloom. "No," said Corporal Rhea, her tone steady despite the situation. She leaned forward, her arms resting on her knees as she addressed the group. "She won't kill us. If she wanted us dead, we'd already be gone. She's making a point. Testing us." "Testing us?" Someone scoffed. "By locking us in here? What kind of test is that?" "A psychological one," Rhea replied, her gaze sweeping over the group. "Think about it. We're soldiers. We rely on our gear, our numbers, our firepower. Strip all that away, and what are we left with? Fear. Doubt. That's what she wants. She wants us to break." Her words hung in the air, sinking into the minds of her comrades. Slowly, heads began to nod, understanding dawning even as dread settled deeper. The Queen wasn't interested in killing them outright. She wanted to dismantle their morale, piece by excruciating piece. And judging by the growing silence among the prisoners, it was working. Outside the cell, the alien world continued its rhythmic pulse, oblivious to the turmoil within. Strange flora swayed gently in the breeze, their luminescent petals casting soft hues across the landscape. Birds, or creatures resembling birds, glided overhead, their calls harmonizing with the low hum of the environment. It was peaceful, almost serene, a cruel juxtaposition to the tension boiling inside the transparent prison. Hours passed, or perhaps days. Time became irrelevant in the absence of natural light. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, thirst parched their throats, but none dared complain aloud. The soldier found himself staring at the ceiling, tracing patterns in the faint glow of the crystals. His thoughts drifted to Earth, to the life he'd left behind. Would anyone miss him? Or would his disappearance go unnoticed, chalked up to another casualty of humanity's endless quest for domination? A sudden shift in the air snapped him out of his reverie. The walls of the cell began to shimmer, colors bleeding into one another like oil on water. Murmurs rose among the prisoners as the floor vibrated lightly beneath their feet. Then, without warning, the structure dissolved entirely, leaving them standing in the open air. Blinking against the sudden brightness, they squinted at the figure approaching them, the Queen. She moved with deliberate slowness, her steps measured and graceful. Her people flanked her, their expressions unreadable masks. When she stopped a few paces away, she folded her arms across her chest and studied them with that same piercing gaze. No one spoke. The soldiers stood frozen, unsure whether to prepare for battle or beg for mercy. Finally, she broke the silence. "You've had time to reflect," she said, her voice carrying a strange mix of curiosity and disdain. "Tell me, humans, have you learned anything?" The soldier swallowed hard, his throat dry. He stepped forward cautiously, ignoring the protests of his comrades. "Yes," he said hoarsely, meeting her gaze. "We've learned that we underestimated you. Your people. This place." He paused, gathering his courage. "We came here thinking we could take what we wanted. But now I see that maybe we don't deserve it." The Queen arched an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Go on." "We're not perfect," he admitted, his voice gaining strength despite the weight of his admission. "We make mistakes. We hurt others in our pursuit of power. But we're also capable of change, of growth. If you give us a chance, maybe we can prove that." For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. She simply stared at him, her expression inscrutable. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a sound that was neither cruel nor comforting, but somewhere in between. "Prove it," she said simply. "Show me that you're worth sparing." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving the soldiers standing in stunned silence. As the Queen disappeared into the glowing horizon, her retinue of ethereal beings following silently in her wake, a strange sensation washed over the soldiers. The air seemed to hum with an unfamiliar energy, and the ground beneath their feet felt oddly alive, as though it were breathing in sync with their heartbeats. For a moment, they simply stood there, unsure if they had been granted freedom or merely placed under some new form of surveillance. But then the soldier who had spoken to the queen, the one she'd singled out, felt something shift within him. It started as a faint warmth in his chest, spreading outward like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. At first, he thought it was relief, the natural response to being spared from certain doom. But this was different. This wasn't just emotion. It was knowledge. Images began flashing before his eyes, visions of towering cities made of crystal, rivers that flowed upward instead of down, creatures with forms so alien they defied logic. And amidst it all, he saw her. The queen. Not as she appeared now, defiant and regal, but as she once was, young, uncertain, burdened by doubts about her role as ruler. He saw flashes of her people suffering at the hands of invaders long before humans arrived, other species who came not for conquest but for annihilation. Her resolve hadn't been born of arrogance. It had been forged in fire. The visions ended abruptly, leaving him gasping for breath. His comrades stared at him, their expressions ranging from concern to outright fear. "What's wrong with you?" one of them demanded, gripping his arm tightly. He stammered, struggling to find words. "I think I understand her." Before anyone could respond, the landscape around them began to change. The crystalline structures shimmered and dissolved into mist, revealing a barren wasteland beneath. The vibrant flora, the floating islands, the radiant skies, all of it vanished, replaced by cracked earth and ash-filled winds. The transformation was so sudden, so complete, that several of the soldiers stumbled backward, disoriented. "This isn't real," Corporal Rhea muttered, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound calm. "She's messing with us. It's some kind of illusion." But the soldier shook his head, his eyes wide with realization. "No," he said firmly. "This is real. Or at least, it was. This is what happens when outsiders come here uninvited. They destroy everything." His words hung heavily in the air as the group turned to survey their surroundings. The desolation stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by jagged remnants of what might have once been magnificent spires. In the distance, skeletal remains jutted out of the ground, bones too large to belong to any human or animal they recognized. A low moan echoed across the expanse, carrying with it a weight of sorrow so profound it brought tears to even the toughest among them. "She showed me," the soldier continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "She let me see what happens when civilizations collide. When greed outweighs respect. This world, it doesn't reject visitors lightly. But when it does." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The others didn't need him to. The evidence was right in front of them, undeniable and horrifying. The Queen hadn't imprisoned them to punish them, she'd done it to teach them. To show them what they stood to lose, not just for themselves, but for everyone else involved. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the haze, an alien, though unlike any they'd seen before. Its body was translucent, its features indistinct, as though it existed halfway between reality and memory. It moved toward them slowly, each step accompanied by a soft chime that resonated deep within their bones. The soldiers instinctively raised their weapons, but the creature paid them no mind. Instead, it stopped a few paces away and extended a limb, a tendril-like appendage that glowed faintly at the tip. "Do not harm it," the soldier shouted, lowering his rifle. "It's part of this place. Part of her." The others hesitated, confusion written plainly on their faces. "How do you know that?" someone asked. "Because I can feel it," he replied, stepping closer to the creature. As he did, the tendril brushed against his forehead, and another wave of images flooded his mind. This time, however, they weren't focused solely on the Queen or her history. They included glimpses of Earth, cities crumbling under pollution, oceans choked with plastic, forests reduced to ashes. They saw humanity's own capacity for destruction mirrored back at them, laid bare in ways that left no room for denial. When the vision faded, the soldier collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of what he'd witnessed. His comrades rushed to his side, helping him to his feet, but he waved them off. "We're no better than those who came before us," he said, his voice cracking. "We think we're explorers, pioneers, but we're just parasites. consuming everything in our path without giving anything back. For the first time since their capture, silence fell not out of fear, but out of understanding. Each of them grappled with the truth laid bare before them, forced to confront the uncomfortable reality of their mission, and their species. They hadn't come here seeking peace or knowledge. They'd come to take, to exploit, to conquer. And now, standing amidst the ruins of a world they hadn't even touched yet, they understood the consequences of such actions. But the twist wasn't over. As the alien creature began to retreat into the haze, it paused and turned back, emitting a series of melodic tones that resonated like a song. The soldier tilted his head, listening intently. "It's saying something," he murmured. "A message for her." "For the Queen?" Rhea asked, frowning. "Why would it send a message through you?" "Because she chose me," he said simply, though the weight of those words settled heavily on his shoulders. "She gave me this connection, for a reason." Without another word, he began walking in the direction the creature had indicated, his steps steady despite the turmoil raging inside him. The others followed reluctantly, their weapons lowered but still gripped tightly in their hands. The barren landscape stretched endlessly ahead, unyielding and unforgiving, yet somehow alive with the promise of redemption, if only they were willing to earn it. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, the Queen watched, waiting to see whether humanity would rise to meet the challenge, or succumb to its own flaws. The soldier led the way, his connection to the alien world growing stronger with each step. The others followed hesitantly, their boots crunching against the brittle earth, their eyes scanning the desolate expanse for any sign of danger, or hope. Though none dared voice it aloud, they all felt the same gnawing question. Was this a test? A final chance to prove themselves worthy of mercy, or was it simply another layer of punishment? As they walked, the air around them began to shift. The oppressive gray haze lifted slightly, revealing faint streaks of color in the sky, pinks and purples that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The ground beneath their feet softened, no longer cracked and lifeless but covered in a thin layer of moss-like vegetation that shimmered faintly under the dim light. It was as if the planet itself was responding to their presence, testing whether they deserved its forgiveness. The soldier paused suddenly, tilting his head as though listening to something only he could hear. His companions stopped behind him, exchanging wary glances. "What is it?" Rhea asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's here," he replied, his tone tinged with awe. "The Queen. She's watching." Before anyone could respond, the landscape transformed once more. The barren wasteland melted away, replaced by an ethereal forest bathed in golden light. Trees with crystalline trunks stretched toward the heavens, their leaves glowing softly like lanterns. Streams of liquid silver wound through the terrain, their surfaces rippling with reflections of stars that shouldn't have been visible during the day. And there, standing at the center of it all, was the Queen. She looked different now, not less regal, but softer somehow. Her opalescent skin shimmered with hues of lavender and gold, and her piercing eyes held a depth of emotion that hadn't been there before. She stood tall, yet her posture wasn't confrontational. It was expectant, as though she were waiting for them to make the next move. The soldier stepped forward, leaving his comrades behind. He approached her slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. When he spoke, his voice carried a quiet strength that surprised even himself. "We understand now," he said. "What we've done, to your world, to others, to our own. We came here thinking we had the right to take what we wanted, but we see now how wrong we were." The Queen studied him silently, her expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded. "You speak truthfully," she said, her melodic voice resonating through the air. "But words are easy. Actions define us." With that, she extended her hand, palm upward. In it rested a small orb of light, pulsing gently like a living thing. The soldier stared at it, unsure of what to do. Sensing his hesitation, the Queen explained. "This is a fragment of my world, a piece of its essence. If you accept it, you must vow to protect it, nurture it, and ensure that it thrives. But know this, should you fail, should greed or arrogance take root within you again, it will destroy not just this place, but yours as well." The weight of her words settled over the group like a heavy blanket. They exchanged uneasy glances, some visibly trembling under the pressure of the decision before them. Finally, the soldier reached out and took the orb from her hand. As soon as his fingers closed around it, warmth flooded through him, filling every corner of his being with a sense of purpose he'd never known before. "We'll protect it," he said firmly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Not because we want redemption, but because we owe it to both our worlds." The Queen smiled faintly, a rare display of approval. "Then let this be the beginning of a new chapter," she said, stepping back as the orb began to glow brighter. "A bond between our peoples, forged not in conquest, but in understanding." The light from the orb expanded rapidly, enveloping the soldiers in its radiant embrace. For a moment, everything disappeared, the forest, the Queen, the very ground beneath their feet. When the light faded, they found themselves back on their ship, the alien world visible through the viewport as a swirling nebula once more. The orb sat securely in the soldier's hand, its gentle pulse a constant reminder of the promise they'd made. Back on Earth, the mission was hailed as a failure. No resources retrieved, no new territories claimed. But the soldier kept silent about what had truly transpired. Instead, he dedicated his life to preserving the orb, studying its properties, and teaching others about the lessons they'd learned on that distant planet. Slowly but surely, change began to ripple outward. Scientists collaborated instead of competed. Governments prioritized sustainability over profit. Humanity started to heal, not just its relationship with the universe, but with itself. Years later, when the soldier lay on his deathbed, frail and gray-haired, he held the orb close to his chest. Its light had dimmed slightly over time, but it still pulsed steadily, a testament to the fragile yet enduring bond between two vastly different civilizations. As his eyes fluttered shut for the last time, he smiled, knowing that somewhere far away, the Queen watched and approved.